In the rugged terrain of New Mexico in 1875, the air was thick with whispers that slithered through the canyons and sprawled over the mesas. The landscape was an unforgiving one, much like the people who inhabited its dusty towns, their hearts as parched as the land that surrounded them. Among the town's sparse population was Naylin, an Apache widow with eyes that held the strength of the mountains and a spirit untamed by the winds of adversity. Yet, in this unforgiving place, her resilience was met with suspicion rather than admiration. It all began on a chilly autumn morning. Pale sunlight trickled through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the earth below. News of her husband's death spread quickly, carried on the wagging tongues of townsfolk. He was found lying still amidst the sagebrush, his life silently ebbing away into the cold ground. In the midst of grief and shock, Naylin found herself ensnared in the thorny brambles of accusation. The whispers grew louder, fueled by the ingrained biases of those quick to point fingers at an Apache woman. In this harsh world, an Apache widow was an easy scapegoat, a convenient vessel for the collective fears and unspoken prejudices of the settlers. Rumors painted Naylin as a vengeful witch, a woman who had beguiled her husband with mystical charms only to lead him to his doom. She was called a sorceress, a demon cloaked in human skin, a menace to the very fabric of civilization the settlers fiercely tried to maintain. The stories twisted and turned, weaving a tapestry of lies that left truth stranded in a forgotten corner. Nolan's days became shadowed by wary glances and distrustful murmurs. Friends turned their backs, and those she had known offered nothing but cold shoulders. Alone, she watched as fear and ignorance fanned the flames of her persecution. The landscape that had once whispered tales of her ancestors' valor now turned treacherous, echoing a narrative of guilt she knew not how to dispel. Despite the brewing storm around her, Naylin carried herself with dignity, her heart heavy yet undeterred. The days passed, blending into a haze of suspicion and isolation. She consulted the spirits of her foremothers, seeking guidance under the moon's watchful eye. Whispered words of wisdom and encouragement flowed from her lips to the night sky, a quiet protest against the injustice threatening to suffocate her. Conflict simmered beneath the surface of the town, poised to erupt at any moment. The tension was palpable, vibrating in the air alongside the desert heat. Naylin could sense the collective breath of the townsfolk, held in anticipation of her downfall. Any moment now, the dust would rise, and the accusatory fingers would find their target. But Naylin held fast. The tendrils of an undeniable truth bound her to the land she loved, promising vindication amidst the turmoil. As the days crawled forward, an eerie unease settled over the town, a prelude to the storm that hovered on the horizon. Naylin stood at the center of this brewing tempest, a solitary figure against the backdrop of her accusers. This, she realized, was her battleground, a place where courage would be tested, where the strength of her spirit must shine against the darkness of ignorance. Yet unknown to many, the real darkness loomed beyond the hills. Unseen hands orchestrated a greater peril, casting an invisible shadow over the town's collective consciousness. Naylin's heart, tuned to the subtle whispers of impending danger, caught their murmurs of foreboding melody suspended in the vast desert silence. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of crimson and gold, Naylin steeled herself for what lay ahead. In this moment of calm before the approaching storm, she vowed that truth and justice would not be strangled by lies and deceit. The battle for her innocence was just beginning, and with it, the promise of a justice long denied lay waiting beyond the twilight. The story had only begun to unfold, each thread weaving a narrative that would test the hearts and minds of all involved, a tale of injustice, courage, and eventual redemption on the Wild West frontier. Naylin's journey was one that demanded to be told, her voice a clarion call to those who dared to listen amid the cacophony of judgment and fear. In the heart of the small frontier town, nestled amidst the arid, untamed landscapes of New Mexico, stood an oppressive edifice of courthouse. Its walls seemed to echo with the cries of those who sought justice, but found only anguish. For Naylin, the Apache widow, this place felt less like a sanctuary of justice and more like a cage. Sunlight filtered through the courtroom's grimy windows, casting weary shadows as if the room itself were tired of the endless tales of woe. Naylin stood before the assembled townsfolk, a lone figure draped in traditional Apache garb, her deep-set eyes scanning faces filled with disdain and scorn. To them, she was already guilty. Her heart ached with the weight of their prejudice as she surveyed the sea of judgments surrounding her. Her crime, the simple fact of being there, of being different, stamped guilty by preconceived notions rather than any shred of truth. As the cacophony of whispers subsided, the judge, a man notorious for his lack of empathy, called the courtroom to order. Beside Nayland, the defense attorney, a well-meaning but timid man, shuffled his papers nervously. Though tasked with defending her, his resolve wavered under the pressure of the town's collective ire. The prosecutor, a surly man with a vindictive leer, stood and began to weave his story of supposed guilt. His words were laced with venom, painting Nayland as a sorceress, a cunning woman who had led her husband to his doom. He played to the crowd's fears, adeptly molding their biases into a tale of deceit and treachery. The more he spoke, the deeper Nayland's heart sank, each lie another stone around her neck. Nayland's attorney rose to counter the accusations, but his arguments were drowned out by the weight of societal prejudice. With every objection overruled, his voice faltered, and the townspeople's anger swelled, feeding off his impotence. It was a trial where reason held no place, where history danced on the whims of those with power. Despite her fears, Nayland was determined not to remain voiceless. When called to testify, she took a deep breath, feeling the earth beneath her feet, a grounding reminder of her ancestry and strength. In a voice steady and calm, she recounted her life with her husband, a story of love and survival on the harsh frontier. But the courtroom's air grew thick with disbelief, her sincerity discarded like chaff in the wind. The cross-examination was ruthless, each question a barb meant to unravel her composure. In moments when Nayland faltered, the townspeople murmured and stirred, relishing what they perceived as her inevitable unraveling. The townsfolk did not see her tears as a testament to her loss and pain, but as veils of guilt being torn away. As the trial dragged on, there came a tense moment. Neither side had yet broken ground. Here was the inflection point, the opportunity for truth to sway hearts, though hope was a fragile thing in such a charged room. Against seeming impossibility, Nayland invoked her husband's spirit, speaking with eloquence and grace, telling of his aspirations and their shared dreams, now pitilessly shattered. Yet, as her voice quivered with emotion, a hush fell over the room, not of respect, but of incredulity. The tide seemed too powerful, the walls of prejudice too high to breach. Nayland, in the silent corners of her soul, felt a dawning acceptance of the futility of her predicament. As the day wore on, the air in the courthouse grew thick with an unrelenting tension, the kind born from battles waged in the soul and lost. Despite the lopsided exchanges, something unforeseen began to unfurl, an intangible shift among a few. A sentinel of doubt, perhaps born from her unwavering dignity, flickered in the eyes of some townsfolk, though not enough to change the looming verdict. The trial drew to a close with a palpable air of inevitability, the jury retiring to deliberate, while the town whispered among themselves, unaware that truth and redemption loomed nearer than they dared hope. For Nayland, the waiting was a relentless torment, a moment out of time where faith and despair clashed. As the doors of the courthouse closed, sealing her fate within, hope seemed as arid as the sands outside. But destiny, capricious as ever, was about to alter course, setting the stage for unexpected heroes, unforeseen courage, and a legacy of justice still unfolding in the chapters ahead. In the heart of New Mexico's sun-baked landscape, where the arid earth stretched endlessly, the town teetered on the brink of despair. Nayland, the falsely accused widow, sat in her cell, absorbing the ominous silence that engulfed her. Though weary, her spirit refused to yield to the injustice that had befallen her. Beyond the walls of her confinement, the town buzzed with unease. Settlers walked with trepidation, shadows from unsavory elements looming ominously over them. The whispers began as a trickle, barely discernible hints of unease, felt only in furtive glances and hushed conversations. The townspeople, once united in their prejudice against Nayland, were beginning to perceive the stirring of something far more threatening. The stillness of the night was increasingly punctuated by distant cries, rattling gunshots, and the ominous echoes of unknown riders penetrating the vulnerable tranquility of their settlement. It was on one such night that a solitary figure rode into town, a harbinger of the chaos that had been awaiting them. Marshal Thompson, a stoic man with weathered skin and piercing eyes, recognized him as Clem Willis, an informant whose loyalty extended only as far as his immediate interests. Clem's breath was ragged, eyes wild with the urgency of his purpose. "Marshal," he gasped, dismounting in haste. "They're coming. Blackjack's gang is riding this way." The name Blackjack sent a ripple of foreboding through Thompson. Blackjack, the outlaw whose infamous deeds spanned territories and whose ruthlessness knew no bounds. It had been Blackjack's band of marauders, not Nayland, who orchestrated the string of violence now terrorizing the region. As the town quivered with a rising tide of fear, Thompson gathered the remaining lawkeepers, a mere handful of men weathered by the stark realities of frontier life. "It's them." Then, Thompson spoke gravely to his deputy, Ethan, a young man fighting to hide his own dread. "We were wrong, Ethan. It was not Nayland, and now justice must find its way before we lose more than just our pride." With urgency in their veins, the townsfolk were assembled in the church, the only structure large enough to accommodate their number. The atmosphere was suffused with a grim determination. Faces once etched with suspicion and disdain now wore the pallor of realization. Amongst the throng stood Abigail, a farmer's wife, her eyes softening with regret as they sought Nayland's familiar face. She whispered to her husband, "Clarence, we were wrong. Clarence, we must make this right." Before the assembly could dissolve into chaos, Marshal Thompson stood firm atop the platform, his presence commanding a reluctant silence. "Listen here, folks," he bellowed over the anxious murmur. "Blackjack and his gang are headed our way. We know now that Nayland had no hand in any crime against us. It's high time we mend our wrongs before it's too late." The tide of guilt that washed over the townspeople was soon eclipsed by the urgent need to survive. With Nayland acquitted in their eyes, a council was formed to hatch a defense strategy. Belatedly recognizing her strength and resourcefulness, in her cell, Nayland stood facing the cold iron bars, her heart unmoving as the key turned in the lock. The marshal stepped inside, his expression softened with contrition. "Nayland," he spoke, clearing the gravel from his voice, "we owe you an apology and a debt of gratitude. We need your help to stand against Blackjack." Nayland, with eyes that mirrored the depths of the desert night, met Thompson's gaze. "I will fight for the truth," she replied, "for those who cannot." As the town braced for the onslaught, it was Nayland who took the helm, her presence an unexpected pillar of strength. Her intimate knowledge of the land, honed through years of living closely with its rhythms, became their beacon. Strategically, she planned their defense, transforming fear into fervor, weakness into unwavering resolve. Under the illumination of the waning moon, the settlers stood beside her, weapons in hand, hearts set on facing the bandits who rode with fury and disregard. The night grew tense, pulsating with the anticipation of the storm to come. As Blackjack's gang thundered closer, the town, once divided by prejudice, found unity in their shared cause. Their defenses, inspired by Nayland's tactical acumen, held firm. The battle that ensued was fierce, echoes of gunfire and cries clashing like thunder across the plain. Amidst the smoke and chaos, Nayland's call to arms reverberated, clarion testament to the strength born of injustice turned to righteousness. With dawn breaking upon a silence baptized by smoke, the townsfolk stood victorious, Blackjack and his marauders either fallen or fled. Under the expanse of endless skies, remorse was tempered by the warmth of redemption, and Nayland, no longer an outsider but a hero, had carved a narrative not just of survival, but of the collective soul's resurgence. In the days to follow, the tale of the Apache widow and her stand against adversity found roots in the annals of the town's shared history. It was a story carried in grateful voices, inscribed in the renewed bonds of kinship that emerged compensation for the lessons learned amid tumult and turmoil. In embracing Nayland, they embraced the spirit of resilience, where justice reclaimed its fractured ground upon the land of New Mexico. In the heart of a town burdened by its own narrow-mindedness, a trial of different sorts began to take place. The accused, Nayland, now stood not in the defendant's spot, but at the forefront of a fervent fight for survival. Her resolve was firm, her spirit unyielding. She was no longer just an Apache widow standing trial, but a leader determined to claim justice, not only for herself, but for those who had wronged her as well. The skies were dusky, painted in hues of deep purple and crimson, as the notorious outlaws threaded their way toward the town, leaving chaos in their wake. Whispers of their impending arrival reached the frightened ears of the townsfolk. Panic seeped into their marrow as they realized the dire nature of their predicament. It was in this moment of despair that they found their unlikely savior, the woman they had once vilified. Nayland, whose heart had been forged in the fiery trials of injustice, presented herself before the cowering settlers. Her presence commanded attention, a testament to her resolute bravery that even the most cynical among them could not ignore. "We stand on the precipice of destruction," Nayland began, her voice a clarion call cutting through the murmur of fear. "But together, we possess the strength to protect this town, to protect each other, and to ensure that justice is served." The townsfolk watched her, a myriad of emotions painted across their faces: shame, regret, desperate hope. It was clear she bore no grudge, but sought only the protection of the lives intertwined with her own in this harsh frontier. As the outlaws approached, silhouetted against the setting sun, Nayland directed the townsfolk into action. Old rifles and pistols were gathered, ammunition found in dusty corners brought to light once more. Men and women, inspired by Nayland's courage, prepared themselves to protect the land they had claimed. Uniting under her leadership in an unexpected yet empowering fraternity, the settlers gathered. Fortified behind wagons, they turned into barricades, hands trembling with weapons they scarcely knew how to wield. Nayland moved among them, offering words of encouragement and strategies forged in both experience and desperation. The moment of confrontation arrived with the thunder of hooves and shouts of encroaching brutality. The outlaws rode in, faces twisted into leers of malevolent intent. But what they faced was not the trembling prey they expected. Instead, they saw a resolute line of defenders standing before a backdrop of defiance and newfound unity. Nayland stood at the forefront, her figure a stark silhouette against the chaos. She held her ground, rifle steady, eyes fixed on the invaders. Her presence was a catalyst, igniting a fierce determination among the townsfolk. The battle began with the crack of gunfire, sharp and jarring in the evening air. Nayland's leadership was impeccable. She maneuvered with grace amidst the turmoil, directing volleys, encouraging those who faltered. Each report of a gun was a testament to their resistance, each fallen outlaw a fragment of justice being restored. There was a moment, a sharp, poignant instant when Nayland found herself face to face with the outlaw leader, a man whose ruthlessness was renowned. In the brief silence that separated them, time seemed to stretch as they stood motionless, locked in a battle of wills, before action exploded into being. The skirmish was fierce, a dance of desperation and determination. But in the end, it was Nayland's resolve that triumphed, her courage unwavering as she disarmed the leader and compelled him to surrender. It was her moment of victory not only over the invaders, but over the prejudices and doubts that had plagued her journey. The remaining outlaws, witnessing their leader's defeat, stumbled back, their confidence shattered. The town erupted in a chorus of relieved triumph as their attackers fled into the night, shadows swallowed by the encroaching darkness. As dawn cast its gentle light across the town, the aftermath revealed a landscape marked by skirmish yet brimming with relief and a sense of shared achievement. Nayland had led them through fire, and in turn, they found in themselves a strength they had long underestimated. In the quiet victory, as townsfolk embraced and celebrated, the realization of Nayland's worth took root in their hearts. They saw in her not just the courage to fight, but the grace to forgive. In acknowledging her leadership, they accepted a truth long overdue: the innate equality and strength in every person, regardless of background or birth. Nayland's legacy became one of redemption, resilience, and the indomitable spirit that fueled justice. Her story, once a whisper of suspicion, transformed into a legend of hope and courage, carving its place in the hearts and history of a community reshaped by her unwavering spirit. The town square of Lincoln, New Mexico, was a place heavy with history, yet the events that unfolded on that particular day would become the most profound chapter in the community's chronicles. The air was crisp, carrying whispers of the past and whispers of regret. As the townsfolk gathered under the midday sun, they stood united, beneficiaries of the courage displayed by an Apache widow, a woman they had once sentenced with their suspicion. As a town, they had failed Nayland, but today was about setting the scales right, or so they hoped. Redemption was a lofty word, one they weren't sure they deserved, but it was essential for healing. Nayland stood at the forefront, a figure of quiet strength. Her presence was commanding, her eyes piercing as they swept across the faces she had grown to know so well. The newfound respect she commanded was palpable, even standing among those who had doubted her with such fervor mere weeks past. Mayor Reynolds, usually a man of grand speeches, found words inadequate today. He stepped forward, hat in hand, a humble gesture that spoke volumes. "Nayland," he began, his voice steady but laden with remorse, we owe you a profound debt of gratitude. It is clear to us now that our prejudices blinded us to the truth. For that, we apologize. We are here to seek your forgiveness." Nayland listened, her face impassive, a skill she had mastered over years of enduring silent judgments. Her mind drifted back to the recent harrowing days, the moments when hope felt like a distant dream. The trial echoed in her memory, a mockery of justice where her pleas for truth were drowned in a tide of silence. Clara, a woman of stout heart and hitherto staunch in her judgments, stepped forward. "In our ignorance, we forgot the humanity that binds us. When the outlaws came, we saw our errors reflected in the strength you showed. You saved us, Nayland. You stood tall when we were on our knees." Clara's words stirred murmurs of agreement, nods spreading through the crowd like a wave, acknowledging the gravity of their past actions. The townspeople, in their acceptance, sought a way forward. Forgiveness was the bridge they hoped Nayland would help them build. Taking a deep breath, Nayland finally spoke. Her voice was calm, resonating with an inner fortitude that had carried her through the darkest hours. "For too long, we have lived as though we were two different worlds. It is time we learn to walk together, not just when danger looms, but in everyday living." A ripple of emotion passed through the assembly. Nayland's words, simple yet profound, held out a hand for reconciliation. Her readiness to forgive was a beacon, guiding them toward a future unmarred by the animosity of the past. "That is a path we would be proud to walk with you," Nayland Mayor Reynolds responded, his relief evident. As the apology wove its spell, transforming remorse into possibilities, the crowd relaxed. There was a sense of catharsis, an understanding that true redemption would take time and effort, and yet they had taken the first important step. Nayland's gaze softened as she watched the people she had fought to protect now extend their warmth and acceptance toward her. Children, who had once been cautioned to avoid her, now approached without fear, their innocence free from the prejudice that had clouded their elders' vision. Mrs. Dawson, the schoolmistress, extended an invitation to Nayland. "We would be honored if you'd share your stories with the students. They should hear of your courage, of the strength of women like you." The thought filled Nayland with unexpected warmth. Sharing her stories was a chance to heal old wounds and to inspire the next generation to look beyond what meets the eye. "Yes, I'd like that," Nayland agreed, her smile radiant. The walls that had once protected her heart crumbling at the edges, making room for new chapters to be written. As the crowd began to disperse, there was a subtle shift in the Iran unspoken promise that Lincoln was a different place now. A town that had once been a hive of suspicion was transforming into a community built on trust and mutual respect. Nayland remained, standing in the heart of the square, witnessing the fruits of her ordeal. Her battle had been for more than just her name. It was for a change in the winds that swept through New Mexico, a new legacy for Apache women. As the iconic figure of survival and triumph, Nayland indeed carved a future bright with the promise of unity and understanding, a legacy destined to echo through generations. Thus, Lincoln and Nayland took a step toward a future where redemption was not merely sought in words, but lived through actions. The tale of the Apache widow was no longer one of injustice, but of profound service, acceptance, and courage. The winds of New Mexico whispered through the desert, carrying with them the tales of a once forgotten land. Among the vast sands and stoic mountains stood the memory of Nayland, the Apache widow whose legacy had defied the very nature of prejudice and brutality. Her story was no ordinary tale. It was a beacon of triumph, a reflection of human resilience and the power to mend even the deepest of divides. The ghosts of the past years had passed since the trial, yet the memory of that time lingered like a ghost haunting the present. Nayland's name was now etched in the minds of those who had witnessed her courage. Her journey from accused to leader was a vivid reminder of how justice, once lost, could be reclaimed. The elders of the town often gathered at sunset, sharing stories of her bravery, conveying to their children the importance of standing up for what is right, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. The town had changed dramatically since Nayland had walked its dusty streets. Gone were the days when whispers of suspicion followed her every step. Now, there was an air of acceptance, a willingness to embrace what was once feared. The people had grown, not just in numbers, but in understanding, a direct result of confronting their own biases under the guidance of the woman they had once condemned. Bridging the divide. Nayland's courage had done more than just vindicate her. It had built bridges between the settlers and the Apache community. leading to an exchange of culture and mutual respect that enriched both groups. Gone were the barriers built on ignorance and mistrust. In their place was an appreciation of shared humanity, a triumph, not solely of one woman's courage, but of the healing process she had initiated. The bridge stretched beyond the town's borders, reaching other communities who had heard of Nayland's tale. Travelers brought with them stories of an Apache widow who had changed the course of history, sparking conversations about justice, prejudice, and the meaning of true community. 3. Reflections of courage. Nayland's story found its way into the hearts of many, reflected in the writings and musings of poets and scholars. Her courage became a central theme in the cultural expressions of the time, from songs sung by children to the murals gracing public spaces. This was more than a tribute. It was an acknowledgement of the transformative power that lay within each individual, waiting to be unleashed. Conflict was not unknown in these parts, and Nayland's narrative provided a framework for dealing with new challenges. Each recounting of her story served as a reminder that adversity could be overcome through unity and perseverance. 4. The seeds of change. It was not just Nayland's actions that left an indelible mark, but the seeds she planted in the minds of those who followed. Young men and women found inspiration in her tale, invoking her courage as they pursued their paths. The very fabric of the community had been altered. The once prevalent narrative of fear and discrimination was now transformed into one of acceptance and hope. Nayland's influence reached far beyond the confines of the town. It ignited movements, led individuals to question unchecked authority, and ultimately contributed to a broader societal shift towards justice and equality. 5. The New Dawn. There were many who, like Nayland, stood at the crossroads of doubt and belief, facing their own trials. Her legacy offered them a guiding light, a sense of belonging, and the courage to face their own shadows. The dawning realization that one person's fight could lead to widespread change was profound, a testament to Nayland's unwavering spirit and dedication. In the years following her ordeal, Nayland faded from the forefront of the town's daily life, yet her spirit remained pervasive. Not a soul could walk the streets or gaze upon the surrounding hills without feeling the impact of her story. She was a silent guardian, watching over a town that had been forever changed by her presence. 6. Eternal echoes. Nayland's life and bravery became eternal echoes, resonating through generations. They inspired countless acts of kindness and understanding, fostering a sense of unity that transcended her physical absence. Her legacy became the cornerstone of a community where trust and fellowship flourished, where hostility once reigned. In the aftermath of Nayland's story, the town discovered its heart-to-heart, born of trials, tempered by courage, and sustained by the knowledge that redemption and acceptance would always light their way. In the end, Nayland's journey was not only her own, but a shared narrative that united a disparate people. Her courage and resilience laid the foundation for a new era in the Wild West, where justice, once elusive, became an attainable dream. And so, in the annals of history, Nayland, the Apache widow, lived on as a beacon of survival, embodying the eternal hope that, even in the harshest of lands, humanity could flourish.